Yo, what's up everybody? It's Ansel again and welcome back. I've got a very exciting keyboard today, the Vento 80 by Owl Labs. And I gotta say, this is really cool, and I hope that the general reception of this board isn't gonna deter you from considering this board as something that you might like. So to start things off, let's talk typing feel. And right off the bat, I've gotta say this thing feels great, for me at least. So using the spring mount, this thing feels bouncy as hell. I mean, there's not a whole lot of flex because the PCB has no flex cuts, but the whole assembly just moves a ton. Compared to previous boards like the Mr. Suit or the Jelly, both of which I've owned, I would say that this one feels a lot more controlled despite being just as movable, I guess. Again, it's super bouncy and I love it, and I think a lot of you are gonna like it too. However, no matter what you do, whether you stuff it with foams or use a stiffer plate, you're never gonna get rid of the bounce, so just accept it if you get this board, or maybe just go for something else. Next, sound. I'm happy to report that this thing sounds really good with or without foams. Yes, Owl Labs is the king and the innovator when it comes to foams, but if you're like me and you don't like any of that, you're gonna get a great sounding keyboard without any of the foams anyways. It's very bright, it's lively. I would say that the spacebar is not nearly as good as the Alphas, but it's still good. It just doesn't quite match up, so that's kind of a downside. Overall, it's a very nice and pleasant sound signature, and I think a lot of you are gonna like it. Although I will say, I feel like it could sound just a little bit better if the internal weight was a little bit bigger. But otherwise, great sounding board. And finally, let's talk design, the most important aspect of this keyboard, and there's a lot to say here. In fact, in my original recording of this review, it was about 17 minutes long. I could not release a video that long, so I'm gonna try to condense it as much as possible. But anyways, let's just start with the quality of it, and it's very good. There's a ton of heft. This thing is so heavy. The machining is perfect. Oh my god, it's beautiful. It's so complex. And the finish is also really nice. Surprisingly, not as smooth or as nice as the Neo 80s finish, just has a little bit more texture. Maybe that's not necessarily a good or bad thing, but it is a very weird observation that I've made. Anyways, continuing on, let's talk about the design and aesthetic overall. And first, public reception. People didn't like it at all. In fact, they were calling it Matrix at home. And I disagree. But here's the thing. For those of you who don't know, Matrix is known for its very loud, brash, these layered, complex designs. There's nothing like it on the market, if I'm being completely honest. They're very distinctive, and you're never gonna mistake another board for a Matrix board. With that being said, the Vento 80 definitely has a lot of design cues and design philosophies that can be easily shared with the Matrix boards. Yes, it has a lot of very complex, very detailed, very layered machining and design cues overall. It's very maximalist, just like the Matrix boards. It's also big, chunky, loud. It isn't afraid to be what it is. But at the same time, I don't think it knows what it is. I feel like the board just isn't as cohesive as a lot of the Matrix boards, if we're gonna make that comparison. But that being said, there are still a lot of really wonderful elements to this board. I mean, from the top, it's beautiful. Not only is the finish this perfectly gentle purple, but there's a lot of rounded edges, there's a lot of layers to it, there's a lot of complexity. Of course, from the top, it's actually a bit simple with this side LED badge that I prefer to keep off, with the chamfered edges that really lean into, I guess, the rounded aesthetic. And you have the side profile, which I think is kind of the best in the business right now. It has this floating illusion to it. It's very similar to the Jelly Evolve, except it just takes it a step further and does it even better. I don't think I've seen a better side profile. Of course, this is personal preference, but to me, this is the best side profile I've ever seen. However, we get to the bottom, and this is where the problems are. There's just too much going on. I can see what they're trying to do. There's a lot of things that are trying to be cohesive. For example, the colors at the bottom weight try to match up with the badge, but these colors don't match up with the vibe of the board overall being purple. This definitely should have been a different, more subdued color, and there shouldn't have been this many colors on the weight to begin with. And yeah, the exposed, I guess, latching system that puts the board together is really cool, and it really gets you to appreciate the design that the Owl Labs put into this board, but it's just kinda off? I don't know, it just doesn't feel cohesive. It's hard to explain. I can tell that there's a ton of passion and unfettered creativity, but that's the problem. There's too much going on. No one said, let's pull the reins and make it simpler. And that's all it really had to do, was just be a little bit simpler. You can still be brash, loud, complex, but in this case, less is definitely more. That being said, I don't think that this design is necessarily bad. It just needs to pull back and really rethink it a little bit. There's a lot that can be done to make this more cohesive. It's just not quite there yet. Again, Owl Labs, hands down to you for being so unafraid to release something like this. As polarizing as it is, I can tell that you guys really loved and put a lot of work into this design. So for that alone, I think you guys deserve points. But from a, I guess, mass appeal point, they kind of lost out there, unfortunately. And finally, let's talk value. This thing is expensive at $510, and not only that, it's a group buy and it's a raffle. So for those of you who actually really love the design, you might not be able to get your hands on it, and if you do, chances are you paid a big price on the aftermarket. That being said, I don't think a whole lot of people will like the board just because of how polarizing it is, so you kind of got that going for you. I get it, sometimes a raffle has to be done, but it does hurt when you really want the keyboard. I don't think that the board is necessarily too expensive. I mean, look at this machining, there's so much going on, but Owl Labs is kind of a monstrosity, and they're kind of capable of a lot. I don't know too much about the industry in this regard, so I'm not gonna speak too much. I do think the board could have been a little bit cheaper, but when you look at something like the F1.8X, which I absolutely love, and I get it, it's from a trusted designer, the price isn't that far off. I mean, mine was $450 all said and done. Do keep that into consideration, but again, I'm not making any firm conclusions here. I'm just saying that if you buy this board, you better know that you want it because it's dang expensive. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Let's hope that Owl Labs can really get their identity honed in. They're so close. They're such big innovators in the game. I think they got this within the next couple keyboards. But anyways, thank you so much for tuning in again. I really appreciate you. I hope you have a great day, and I hope to see you next time. Peace.